friends. Welcome back to the Field and Garden Podcast. It's your friend, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I'm really glad that you're here. So today, I want to just touch on and share from one of my books. And in fact, what happened is I'm kind of working on a project, and I pulled out my book, Vegetables Love Flowers, to read something, to look something up. And I got to reading part of it, and I thought, this book, I believe that the title is a little misleading for some folks because this book is really not about growing vegetables. It's about how flowers benefit vegetables, right? It's Vegetables Love Flowers, and it's why vegetables love flowers. But also, it is really just the snapshot of how I garden and farm. My theory, my belief, the way that I do things, and the thought process behind it. And I think that there is just, it kind of follows my whole process. I feel like that I share is I don't want to give people fish. I want to teach them how to fish. Right? I get asked direct questions all the time like, well, when are you planting yours? Or, how much do you sell yours for? Those are all really easy questions for me to answer, but my answer may not apply to you in your situation. And I feel like Vegetables Love Flowers is kind of a snapshot of what my thoughts are and what drives me. And as I was looking, I was actually going to this book to look at the diagrams in the back that kind of demonstrate succession planting. Because look, y'all, this book really tells you, first off, why flowers benefit vegetables, and then how planting a cutting garden in a vegetable patch is the perfect marriage of providing continuous flowers throughout the season to invite these beneficial elements into your garden, creatures, insects, birds, everything in between. So Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm at a loss for words for just a moment because as I'm reading this book, it's like it's reminding me of why I do some of the things I do. And I just really wanted to share them with you guys. And so the book is about the purposes of this cutting garden in a veggie patch. But then there's a large section of the book that talks about setting up a little cutting garden, how I maintain it, how I set it up, how I cut it, some conditioning tips, and then it features my favorite flowers for that cutting garden. It's like the ground foundation of a great little cutting garden. And then in section 3 of the garden, which is where I'm thinking I'm gonna read to you from here, is the heroes of the garden, because I think some of these are like so overlooked. And then also there's growing a healthy garden. So I'm going to read you the introduction to section 3. The book is in 4 sections. And this is the heroes of the garden. And there's a beautiful image of our Indian summer rudbeckia with a precious little goldfinch sitting on top of them. And the caption says, "The power of insect-eating birds in the garden is underestimated. This goldfinch eats many seeds, but also consumes vast numbers of insects." So here's the introduction to Heroes of the Garden. Beneficial creatures are nature's way of pollinating plants, controlling pests, processing organic matter, dealing with weed seeds, and a whole lot more in a garden and yard. A smile is sure to spread across your face as you become familiar with some of these garden heroes and what tasks they are quietly doing without us even noticing. These guys are ready and waiting for the invite to come set up housekeeping, raise their families, and do their jobs. How do we invite them? By what we grow and how we treat it. Give them what they need and step back. I consider a beneficial creature to be any living thing that contributes to my garden in some way. Every living creature benefits something at some time in their lifetime. What would the good bugs eat if there were no bad bugs? Did you know that possums eat ticks? The common starling, a bird people tend to loathe, eats slugs. I'm learning to not pass judgment on any creature until I know what they are, what their story is, and what they may contribute to my garden. Pollinators and other beneficial insects, birds, reptiles, and other creatures are on the decline because of habitat loss, pollution, and pesticide poisoning. The yards and gardens we offer can invite them to stay, send them looking elsewhere, or perhaps even take their life. It's up to the gardener. Take a moment and view your garden and yard through the eyes of a bee, bird, or frog. What do you see? An all-natural garden of trees, shrubs, and plants to explore, or an endless lawn with nowhere to hide, rest, eat, or raise a family? Once we gain a better understanding of how the ecosystem works to support these creatures, it is easy to see how and why things have gone so badly for them. If you asked any beneficial insect or creature how life is going these days, I think they'd say, it seems like the world has declared war on us. One yard and garden at a time, this can change. On the following pages, I hope you're going to reunite with some of the more well-known beneficial creatures and perhaps learn about some new ones. You might be skeptical or even frightened until you learn just what they are really up to in the garden and how good they are at their jobs. I was personally delighted to give up the chore of trying to eliminate the destructive voles that lived in my garden. I turned this job over to the black racer snakes that now reside in my garden rock pile. They are far better at the job than I was, and I don't even have to lift a finger. Before you dive into looking at creatures and insects in the garden, you must have a good resource to identify what it is, both the good and the bad. Do not do any hand picking, water blasting, or treating with any product until you have confirmed identification. Sometimes it can be surprising. Folks, this is just so true. I mean, I think that we once again don't know what we don't know. We don't know the other side of the story. And this leads us to really just be discouraged at times, to feel overwhelmed. But I'm telling you, once you learn about what's going on out there in the garden, first off, it really is so fascinating, and it's so very fun to be out in the garden. And once you learn a little bit, you start looking for this stuff. And once you start looking, you find it. And when you find it, you can't believe it. You just can't believe it. How many times especially when we were in high production, y'all, I can remember, there's 5 of us spread out over the field, out there cutting flowers. And my sister typically would notice that I'm no longer cutting. I'm watching or videoing or taking pictures. She's like, what are we doing here? Are we cutting flowers or are we taking pictures? Because it is so easy to get caught up in the excitement of what's going on in 2 square inches of your entire garden. It is just so fascinating. So I really encourage you to consider that. So now section 4 of this garden, so the section I just read you about kind of introduces you into some of the common creatures out in our garden. This section, Growing a Healthy Garden, is about the practices that I follow. And this section perhaps has my most favorite image in this entire book. It is a photo that, Bob Scammerhorn is the photographer of my book. Bob is a award-winning wildlife photographer. He and I met in an unlikely place. We were both speaking at a Master Gardener conference. So this was 6-7 years ago. And I was so impressed with his presentation and the imagery that I asked him, would he be interested in, shooting for my book deal that I had just gotten. And I could tell he thought I was just blowing smoke. He was so funny. Anyway, turns out that we ended up working together and we spent a summer, him, Suzanne, and I, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, multiple days a week for weeks and weeks taking these images. And so this image is of a photo of our golden that we had at that time, Barry, who is just a beautiful girl. And she is sitting in a field of buckwheat with a flower crown on her head of feverfew. And it was just such a suiting image to kind of take this message of growing a healthy garden. And the caption says, "My farm is safe for people, pets, and wildlife to sit, live, and eat." Here is Barry modeling a feverfew flower crown in a field of buckwheat. And, my journey of pursuing organic, no pesticide gardening was rooted in my love of Goldens and my participation in that sport, and not wanting my, and here very timely, do you hear that noise? That's Tucker having a dream. My current golden retriever. Sorry, y'all. Oh, boy. So watching my dogs walk in the garden, pick their own vegetables, roll in it, made me question, what in the world are we putting into our gardens? Even organics are harmful. So Goldens are a big part of our life, and that's why I chose her to be in this imagery. So with that said, I want to read you the introduction to this garden because it kind of, again, just gives you a snapshot of this last section of the book, really shares, the overview of kind of how I do and think about stuff. Growing a healthy garden. As I write this section of the book, my garden is 6 weeks into the growing season. While this has proven to be a challenge as the book and the farm jockey for every minute of my time, I am reminded on each trip to the garden why I do and don't do certain chores. What has become second nature for me is being highlighted just in time to share here. I will confess now that there are times I don't follow my own suggestions and pay the gardening price. This was evident as I walked out to the bush pea patch just weeks ago to find the entire crop of beautiful 3-inch pea shoots pulled out and left shriveled and dead. Undoubtedly, they were pulled up by a crow looking for the pea seed to eat. This type of damage is preventable by simply covering the planting with a row cover. Even those who know what to do to prevent problems sometimes just don't do it. And I am continuing to live and learn hard lessons in my own garden. Beyond offering that I am an urban cut flower farmer growing in the midst of a city in southeastern Virginia, I haven't shared my city growing conditions and challenges. On the 2.5-acre property that includes my home, I have 1.5 acres of working garden. These gardens are flanked by permanent planting areas. I do not have a greenhouse or any hoop house structures. All of my flowers and vegetables are grown outdoors in a garden. I do all of my seed starting indoors in a 10-foot by 10-foot room equipped with seedling heat mats and shelving units with hanging grow lights. During the peak years on my farm, we started 100,000 seedlings throughout each year and harvested over 10,000 stems of flowers each week in season. It is possible to grow a lot in a small space and to do so with little infrastructure. The permanent plantings that surround the gardens have proven to be a huge benefit to the overall health of the gardens. A few years ago, I began planting a 12,000 square foot native tree, shrub, and perennial border. This hedgerow is now home to the beneficial community of creatures here on the farm and helps them stay put. Growing a healthy garden is good for you, the environment, and all the creatures that live in it. I've learned that growing naturally strong plants, surrounding them with as many natives as possible, and using common sense gardening practices have created this gardening good life. It's just as a garden should be. Y'all, so this section includes, how I seed start, control pests, how I grow, weed prevention. Y'all, this book is, the tagline says companion planting for beauty and bounty. And while I didn't actually choose that tagline, the publisher kind of does that. It's not this plant to prevent this problem. It is the ultimate companion planting. It's planting flowers in the presence of vegetables, minus any pesticide intervention, to restore the natural order of a garden, of nature. I mean, that's ultimately it. We tend to want to overcomplicate it. Yes, there are surely deeper solutions, but it all starts with this. And I know for me, my focus is producing and growing beautiful cut flowers, and I want a big picture to follow in my garden, and that's what it's become for me. Surely there are specific flowers that attract specific things or prevent specific things, and that's a really interesting and great path to go down. But for me, I want a general overall health of garden that has just evolved through the years. And truly planting a garden that is healthy, sustainable, meaning it's not dependent on a lot of products, and doing it, producing vegetables for our family, growing a ton of flowers, whether it's for production as we do for sale, or for your own personal habit. It's really pretty amazing. And, as I've gotten distracted from the project this all started with this morning, I'm just reminded again that I feel like Vegetables Love Flowers is a handbook of whether you want to start a little cutting garden or do you want to ramp up. I feel like it's practically impossible to be a organic gardener not using pesticides without having flowers. And this is your guide to be able to include them, to be able to go out to your garden twice a week, harvest your vegetables, harvest your flowers, and keep the party going in your garden. Whether it's a 10 by 10 garden, a 20 by 20, or a half an acre, it's all about that percentage of just including some flowers in your garden. So y'all, I would love to sign a copy of Vegetables Love Flowers for you. But of course, the book is available from all of your favorite book suppliers. And there is also a free book study that I've done to go along with the book. It's a video to go along with each chapter, kind of sharing the backstory of the book. It's kind of like a continuation of it, and it doesn't matter where you purchase the book. You can find the link to request it below in the show notes, or you can always find it on my website, thegardenersworkshop.com. Go to the book product page, which is in my store, and about halfway down it says claim your free book study. Doesn't matter where you purchased it. You don't need any proof of purchase. And I would just love for you to have that. So y'all, a garden taken to the next level is once you realize what is going on out there in your garden and how much it helps you and how much, oh my goodness, how much enjoyment you'll get by knowing while you're sitting inside doing something else, there's workers out in your garden. You just have to invite them, give them what they need. Do not use pesticides to harm them and kill them. And the party just gets better with each passing year. So friends, I really appreciate you joining me here. And if you're enjoying my podcast, I would really appreciate you dropping a line on the review. I read them all. Thank you so much. That helps me. Whatever your podcast app that you're listening to this, with each additional review, they show my podcast to other people that are browsing. And I just appreciate that so much. And of course, you can find tons of resources and how you can connect with me live each week. I go live several times on different platforms, and you can find all of those over at thegardenersworkshop.com. And friend, until we meet again, ciao.